The night my son tried to have me declared incompetent, he made one mistake. He smiled before I picked up the pen. Not a nervous smile. Not a son smile. It was the smile of a man who believed the old fool in front of him had already lost. The nursing home director stood beside him. My daughter-in-law held my elbow like I was made of glass. And on the table between us sat the document that would erase my life. I stared at the blank signature line, then looked at my son and said, "Before I sign, tell them what you did to your mother's house. My name is Samuel Whitaker. I am 72 years old, and for most of my life, people in Barrow County, Georgia knew me as the man who could build anything with his hands. I was not born into money. I was born in a 2-room farmhouse with a tin roof that screamed every time it rained. My father fixed tractors for cash and favors. My mother took in laundry from families who had more pride than kindness. We did not talk about dreams back then. We talked about Bill's weather and whether the well pump would survive another winter. But I had one dream, and her name was Margaret. Margaret Ann Whitaker had hair the color of wheat in late August, and eyes that could make an angry man forget what he was angry about. She married me when I had nothing but a used pickup truck, a toolbox, and a stubborn promise that one day I would build her a home that never leaked, never shook, and never made her feel poor. For 38 years I kept that promise, one board at a time. I bought 12 acres outside Maple Ridge when nobody wanted that land. Back then it was nothing but red clay pine trees and a cracked gravel road that turned to soup every spring. People laughed when I bought it. They said I had paid good money for weeds and snakes. Margaret did not laugh. She stood beside me in that empty field wind, tugging at her blue dress, and said, "This is where the kitchen window should face east. I want to see the morning before anyone else does." So that was where I built the kitchen. I built the house myself after long days working construction. Every stud in those walls passed through my hands. Every cabinet was measured twice because Margaret hated crooked lines. I carved the porch railings during the winter our son was born, sitting under a shop light with a space heater by my feet, because Margaret wanted something that looked soft and old-fashioned. I laid the stone fireplace with rocks we collected from the creek bed behind the property. When the house was finally finished, I carried Margaret across the threshold, even though my back was already giving me trouble. She laughed so hard she dropped the house key into the flower bed. We spent 20 minutes on our hands and knees looking for it, while fireflies blinked around us like little blessings. That house was not just wood and nails. It was the proof that a poor man could love his wife with his whole life. Our only child, Daniel, grew up inside those walls. I taught him to ride his bicycle in the driveway. Margaret packed his lunch at the kitchen island. We measured his height on the pantry doorframe every birthday until he got too proud to stand still. When he got into college, Margaret cried in the laundry room so he would not see how much she would miss him. When he married Claire, Margaret gave the girl her grandmother's pearl earrings and told me later, "She is sharp around the edges, Sam. But maybe love will soften her." Love did not soften Claire. Money sharpened her. Margaret passed away 3 years ago in our upstairs bedroom, with rain tapping softly against the windows and my hand wrapped around hers. Cancer took her slowly the way winter takes leaves from a tree. The morning after the funeral, Daniel stood on the porch staring out over the property and told me I should not live alone in such a large house. At the time I thought it was concern. That was the first lie I told myself. The second lie came 2 years later when Daniel started visiting every Sunday with Claire and a covered dish she had not cooked herself. They brought brochures for retirement communities. They mentioned my age more than my health. They used words like safety, convenience, supervision, and peace of mind. Claire would glance around Margaret's kitchen as if the wallpaper offended her. Daniel would sigh whenever I forgot where I placed my reading glasses. "You worked hard, Dad," he would say, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You deserve to relax somewhere people can take care of you." "I already have a home," I told him. "You have a house," Claire corrected gently, though there was nothing gentle in her eyes. "A home is where your needs are met." I looked at her across the kitchen table. This woman wearing my dead wife's pearls to Sunday dinner, and felt something cold move through my chest. My needs were not complicated. Coffee on the porch. Margaret's roses blooming along the fence. The sound of wind through the pines. The pantry doorframe with Daniel's childhood pencil mark still scratched into the paint. I did not need a community room scheduled meals, or a nurse checking whether I had swallowed my vitamins. But Daniel kept pressing. By spring, his concern turned into impatience. He began correcting me in front of people. At church, when I forgot the name of a new deacon's wife, Daniel laughed too loudly and said, "Dad's memory is not what it used to be." At the hardware store, when I paid cash instead of tapping a card, Claire whispered to the cashier, "He gets confused by machines." When I drove myself to the pharmacy, Daniel called me 3 times in 20 minutes, and later accused me of wandering. I saw what they were building. A picture, not of who I was, but of who they needed me to become. A tired old man, a confused widower, a liability, a problem. Still, I did not fight them. Not yet, because I had learned something in construction. When a wall begins to crack, you do not swing a hammer blindly. You listen. You watch where the pressure is coming from. You find the beam carrying the weight. The beam was not Daniel. The beam was Claire's father, Preston Vale. Preston was the kind of man who wore Italian loafers on dirt roads and called everyone friend while looking over their shoulder for someone richer. He owned a development company called Vale Urban Partners, though from what I could tell, most of his business came from convincing aging landowners that their property was worth less than it really was. He had been sniffing around Maple Ridge for years, especially after the county announced plans for a new medical campus and interstate connector less than 2 miles from my land. Suddenly, land nobody wanted became land everybody wanted. I knew the numbers before Daniel did. I still had friends in county planning, men who had poured concrete with me when our knees still worked. They told me quietly that developers were assembling parcels around mine. They told me my 12 acres sat right in the center of the future commercial corridor. "How much?" I asked one of them. He looked around before answering. "Sam, if the hospital deal goes through, your land could clear 30 million easy. Maybe more if they need access rights." $30 million. I did not tell Daniel. I did not tell Claire. And I certainly did not tell Preston Vale. Margaret and I had made arrangements years before she died. The house and land were placed in a private family trust after my heart surgery. On paper, I lived there. In reality, the trust held the property, and I remained the sole trustee until my death or voluntary resignation. Daniel knew there was a trust, but he never cared enough to read the documents. He assumed old paperwork meant old weakness. That assumption would cost him everything. The first real crack appeared on a Thursday afternoon in late October. I came home from the cemetery carrying fresh flowers for Margaret's grave. Her roses had finally stopped blooming for the season, so I bought white lilies from the grocery store. The kind she used to say made the house smell like Sunday morning. When I pulled into the driveway, there was a black SUV parked near my porch. Preston Vale stood by the front steps with Daniel and Claire. A woman in a navy business suit was taking photographs of the exterior. Another man held a clipboard and walked along the fence line, pointing toward the old barn. I parked slowly. Daniel's face changed the moment he saw me. "Dad," he called too brightly, "you're back early." From visiting my wife, I asked. I did not know grief had office hours. Claire forced a smile, but her fingers tightened around the strap of her designer purse. Preston stepped forward with that polished developer grin, extending his hand. as if we were meeting at a golf tournament instead of standing on the porch I built for a woman he had never respected. "Samuel," he said warmly, "beautiful property, truly beautiful. Daniel was just showing us around." "Was he?" Daniel moved quickly between us. "It is nothing serious, Dad. Preston had some associates in the area, and I thought it would be good for them to see the place, just in case we ever decide to downsize." I repeated. A small silence fell over the yard. The woman in the navy suit lowered her phone. The man with the clipboard stopped pretending not to listen. Even the pine trees seemed to hold their breath. Claire stepped in, her voice smooth as cream poured over poison. "Samuel, nobody is trying to upset you. We all know how emotionally attached you are to this old place. But Daniel has power of attorney discussions coming up with your attorney, and we simply want to make responsible plans." I looked at Daniel. His eyes slid away from mine. I had never given him power of attorney. I had never scheduled any such discussion. But I saw the folder tucked beneath Claire's arm, thick with printed papers, yellow tabs, and one visible line near the top. "Residential sale agreement." My hand tightened around the lilies until the stems bent. "Get off my porch," I said quietly. Preston's smile flickered. "Samuel, I think there has been a misunderstanding." "No," I replied, looking at my son. "The misunderstanding is that you thought I was too old to understand what a clipboard means." Daniel's jaw clenched. For one brief second the mask slipped. I saw not concern, not love, not even shame. I saw annoyance, pure entitled annoyance that his father had come home before the vultures finished measuring the bones. Then he softened his face again. "Dad," he said, lowering his voice, "you are embarrassing yourself." There it was, the sentence every weak man uses when truth arrives too early. I walked past him and set the lilies on the porch table Margaret had painted yellow 20 years ago. My hands were steady now. The sadness had begun turning into something cleaner, colder, and far more useful. "I built this house for your mother," I said. "Not for sale signs, not for developers, not for your wife's father." Claire's expression hardened. "Margaret is gone, Samuel." The yard went silent. Daniel closed his eyes as if even he knew she had gone too far. I turned slowly toward Claire. The wind moved through the pines behind her, carrying the dry smell of fallen leaves and distant rain. For a moment all I could hear was Margaret's voice in my memory telling me to breathe before I spoke. So I breathed. Then I smiled. It was a small smile, tired, almost defeated. "You are right, Claire," I said softly. "Margaret is gone." Relief flashed in Daniel's eyes. Claire lifted her chin, mistaking my quiet for surrender. I looked back at the house, at the porch railings I had carved, at the kitchen window facing east, at the roofline I had framed beneath a July sun, so hot it burned the skin off my neck. "But I am still here," I said. "And while I am still here, nobody sells the house I built for her." Daniel stepped closer. "Dad, please do not make this difficult." I looked at the folder beneath Claire's arm. Then I looked at Preston Vale. Then I looked at my son, and for the first time I understood that they had not come to ask. They had come to take. I picked up Margaret's lilies, walked into my house, and locked the door behind me. That evening, as rain began ticking against the windows, I sat alone at the kitchen table with every light turned off, except the small lamp above Margaret's empty chair. I could still smell the lilies. I could still see Daniel's eyes sliding away from mine. I could still hear Claire saying Margaret was gone, as if death had turned my wife's memory into a legal inconvenience. At 8:43 p.m. an email arrived from a law office I did not recognize. Attached were 3 documents: a petition for assisted residential placement, a physician's statement questioning my mental capacity, and a notarized authorization bearing my signature. Only I had never signed it. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I opened the top drawer beside me. and took out the old brass key to Margaret's locked filing cabinet. Because there was one thing Daniel and Claire did not know. Margaret had seen this coming before any of us did. I did not open Margaret's filing cabinet immediately. For several minutes I sat in the kitchen listening to the rain scratch softly against the windows, staring at the brass key resting in my palm. It was old and slightly bent near the teeth. Margaret had tied a piece of blue ribbon through the hole at the top years ago because she said practical things deserve beauty too. That was my wife. She could make a grocery list feel like a poem. The filing cabinet stood in the corner of the den beneath a framed photograph of the two of us on our 25th anniversary. Margaret was wearing a yellow dress. I was wearing a suit that no longer fit and smiling like a man who had somehow tricked heaven into letting him keep an angel. I crossed the room slowly, my knees complaining with every step. People like Daniel mistook that sound for weakness. They heard the pop in my joints and forgot those same knees had carried roofing bundles up ladders in August heat. They saw the tremor in my left hand and forgot that hand had signed payroll checks for 30 men when half the town was laid off. They heard me pause before remembering a name and assumed my mind had softened. But age does not make a man harmless. Sometimes age simply teaches him where to place the knife. The lock clicked open. Inside Margaret's cabinet were files organized with the kind of precision that used to make me laugh. Color-coded tabs, dates written in her clean cursive, small notes paper-clipped to documents because she never trusted anyone, including herself, to remember what mattered. The top drawer held medical records. The second held insurance papers. The bottom drawer held the truth. There was a red folder labeled **** Sam. If Daniel ever pushes too hard. ****. My chest tightened. For a moment I could not breathe. I lowered myself into the old leather chair and placed the folder on my lap. My fingers rested on Margaret's handwriting. The house was silent except for the rain and the distant hum of the refrigerator. I half expected her to walk in from the hallway, wiping flour on her apron, telling me not to make that face because worry never fixed a roof. I opened the folder. The first page was a letter. Not a legal document, not a bank statement. A letter written to me in blue ink. **Sam***. If you are reading this, then our boy has forgotten who he came from. I closed my eyes. The room blurred. I had prepared myself for paperwork. I had not prepared myself for her voice. I kept reading. **. I love Daniel. I know you do too. But love does not require blindness. Claire watches this house the way hungry people watch a locked bakery. Her father asked questions that have nothing to do with family. I do not trust either of them with the land, and I worry Daniel wants their approval more than he wants our peace. **. You promised me a home. I promised you I would protect it after I was gone. Behind the letter were copies of trust documents I had not looked at in years. I knew the basics, of course. Margaret and I had signed the Maple Ridge Family Land Trust after my heart surgery. Back then our attorney said it was the best way to prevent probate trouble and keep the land from being chopped up if something happened to both of us. But Margaret had added something else, an amendment, signed 6 months before she died. My name remained sole trustee. Daniel was listed only as a conditional successor trustee, and that condition was brutal in its clarity. He could not assume control through medical guardianship power of attorney or third-party petition. He could only take over after my confirmed death or after a voluntary resignation signed in person before 2 independent witnesses and our original trust attorney. Not a nursing home director, not a doctor I had never met, not a notary bought with Claire's smile. Our attorney, Elaine Mercer. Margaret had known. My sweet, soft-spoken wife with flour on her hands and hymns in her mouth had built a wall of legal concrete around the house I built for her. I let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Then I turned the page. There were county maps, surveyor notes, copies of zoning proposals, letters from developers, offers I had thrown away without answering. And at the very back, tucked into a clear plastic sleeve, was a handwritten note Margaret had made after a meeting I barely remembered. * Preston Vale asked about access rights again. He smiled too much. Do not trust him. Land is worth more than he knows. I leaned back in the chair. The rain had stopped. Outside, the dark windows reflected an old man sitting alone beneath a photograph of his dead wife. But I no longer felt alone. I felt accompanied, and I felt dangerous. The next morning, Daniel called before sunrise. I was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, and every document spread neatly in front of me. His forged authorization sat beside Margaret's trust amendment like a cheap counterfeit watch next to a wedding ring. "Dad," he said when I answered. His voice was soft, careful, rehearsed. "Claire told me you received some legal paperwork last night." "I know it probably scared you." "It did surprise me," I said. He exhaled gently, playing the patient son. "I wish you had called me. You should not be handling complicated documents alone anymore." I looked at Margaret's letter. "You may be right." Silence. He had expected anger, resistance, accusations, not agreement. "Well," he continued slowly, "that is why Claire and I are trying to help. The placement petition is not a punishment, it is protection. Maple Grove is one of the best assisted living communities in the state. Is it? It has medical staff, security, memory care, everything. You would not have to worry about bills, maintenance, storms, driving, cooking, or the house," I said. He paused. Only half a second. But I heard it. "Dad, the house is part of the stress," he said. "You are attached to it in a way that is not healthy. Mom would not want you rattling around there alone." My hand tightened around the mug. There are moments when anger is a fire, and there are moments when anger becomes a locked door. I chose the door. "Maybe," I said quietly. "Maybe your mother would want me safe." Daniel's relief came through the phone like warm breath on glass. "Exactly. That is all I am trying to do." "Who is the doctor?" I asked. "What?" "The statement says Dr. Howard Ellison examined me and found signs of cognitive decline." "I do not remember meeting him." Daniel recovered quickly. "You probably forgot." "That is kind of the point, Dad." I smiled into my coffee. There it was again, the blade wrapped in concern. "I suppose so," I said. "When do you want to talk?" "Tonight," he answered too quickly. "Claire and I will come by after dinner. Preston may join us just to make sure the transition is handled professionally. Your father-in-law is very generous with his time. He cares about family." "No," I said softly. "He cares about land." Another silence. This one lasted longer. "Dad," Daniel said, his voice cooling, "do not start this again." "I am tired, son. I will see you tonight." I hung up before he could regain control of the conversation. Then I made 3 calls. The first was to Dr. Howard Ellison's office. The receptionist sounded confused when I gave my name. She searched the system twice, then told me there was no record of any appointment, examination, referral, or medical file under Samuel Whitaker. When I asked whether Dr. Ellison signed outside capacity statements, her voice hardened and she transferred me to the office manager. I did not accuse anyone. I simply asked for an email confirming I had never been seen there. People underestimate polite old men. They think politeness means surrender. In my experience, politeness gets more signatures than shouting ever did. The second call was to the county clerk. The notarized authorization had been filed electronically by a mobile notary named Marissa Cole. I recognized the last name. Claire's college roommate had married a man named Cole and opened a boutique legal service downtown. Friendly fraud, the kind done over white wine and whispered favors. The third call was to Elaine Mercer. She answered on the second ring. "Sam," she said, and her voice immediately changed. "Tell me what happened. Not how are you. Not what do you need." Elaine had been Margaret's friend before she was our attorney. She had sat beside my wife during chemo appointments and pretended not to cry in the parking lot. She knew exactly why I would call about the trust. I told her everything. The developers on the porch, the forged authorization, the nursing home petition, Dr. Ellison's false statement, Daniel's call, Preston Vale's involvement. Elaine did not interrupt once. When I finished, I heard papers moving on her end. "Sam," she said carefully, "listen to me. Do not sign anything. Do not let them take you anywhere. Do not allow a private evaluation inside your home without me present. I was not planning to." "There is more," she said. Something in her tone made the room colder. "What more?" "I checked the county system while you were talking. A preliminary sale notice was filed yesterday against the residential structure and surrounding 2-acre parcel." My eyes moved to the window facing the porch Margaret loved. "They sold my house." "They tried to," Elaine said. "The buyer is an entity called Vale Ridge Medical Development. The signature attached to the notice is yours." The coffee in my stomach turned to stone. Elaine kept speaking, each word measured and sharp. "But here is what they missed. They separated the house from the land description incorrectly. They think they can sell the structure and 2 acres first, then pressure you out of the remaining acreage later." I looked at Margaret's folder. The maps, the access notes, the trust amendment. "And can they?" "No," Elaine said. "Because the house, the access road, the mineral rights, the easement corridor, and the full 12 acres are still locked inside the trust. You are still the only living person who can authorize a valid sale." Outside sunlight began spreading across the kitchen window Margaret had designed to face east. For the first time in 3 years, morning felt like an answer. "Elaine," I said, "how much is the land really worth?" She hesitated. "With the hospital corridor confirmed, conservative estimate 38 to 42 million. Possibly more if Preston needs your access road to complete his development." I stared at the empty chair across from me. Margaret had protected a house, but she had also protected a kingdom. Elaine's voice dropped. "Sam, there is one more thing. The assisted living petition is already on the emergency docket." "When?" "Monday morning." It was Friday. Daniel and Claire were coming tonight, and now I understood the hurry. They did not just want me out of the house. They needed me legally silenced before anyone discovered I still held the key to $40 million. I folded Margaret's letter, placed it carefully back into the red folder, and stood up. My knees cracked. My back ached. My left hand trembled. But my mind was as clear as cut glass. When Daniel arrived that night with Claire and Preston Vale, I would not confront them. I would not accuse them. I would do something far more useful. I would let them think the old man was finally ready to break. They arrived at 7:18 that evening. I remember because Margaret's old wall clock chimed once, just as Daniel's headlights swept across the curtains. That brass chime had marked thousands of ordinary nights in our marriage supper on the stove. Margaret humming at the sink. Daniel doing homework with one shoe kicked under the table. That night it sounded like a warning bell. I had returned the red folder to Margaret's cabinet and locked it away. The forged authorization, the false medical statement, and Elaine's notes were hidden beneath a loose pantry floorboard wrapped in one of Margaret's embroidered dish towels. On the kitchen table I left only tea, a pill organizer, and crossword puzzles. A stage. Every betrayal needs a stage. I shuffled to the door with one hand dragging along the wall. I did not need support. I needed them to believe I did. Daniel stood on the porch holding a grocery store pie. Claire stood beside him in my dead wife's pearls. Preston Vale waited behind them in a charcoal coat, smiling like a man who had already spent money he did not yet legally own. "Dad," Daniel said gently, "you look tired." I am tired. Claire stepped inside without waiting to be invited. Her perfume cut through the warm smell of tea and old wood. Preston extended his hand. Samuel, good to see you again. I shook it weakly. His palm was dry. Men like Preston did not sweat when they lied because lying was not stress to them. It was business. We moved into the kitchen. Daniel pulled out Margaret's chair for Claire. He did not ask. He simply placed his wife where his mother had sat every morning for 38 years. I let my eyes drift toward it, then lowered myself into the chair across from her. Daniel noticed. For 1 second, guilt flickered across his face. Claire opened her folder and spread papers across my kitchen table like placemats. Preston placed his leather portfolio beside them. Daniel sat close enough to touch my arm whenever he wanted to perform tenderness. Dad, he began, we do not want tonight to feel confrontational. Then why did you bring a developer to family dinner? Claire's smile tightened. Preston chuckled. I am here as a friend of the family. No, I said through tired eyes. You are here because there is money under my house. Daniel's fingers closed around my wrist, not painfully, possessively. Dad, he whispered, that is exactly the kind of statement we are worried about. Claire leaned in. Paranoid statements, suspicious statements, accusing everyone of wanting something from you. I almost laughed. Everyone at that table wanted something from me. My house, my land, my signature, my silence. Daniel slid a brochure in front of me. This packet is for Maple Grove. Just a transitional care agreement. 30 days at first. A trial stay. A nursing home. Assisted living, Claire corrected. There is a difference. Preston added private rooms, garden paths, memory support if needed. Memory support. 2 soft words built like prison bars. They have an opening Monday, Daniel said. The timing is a blessing. A blessing. That was the word he chose for removing me from the home I built for his mother. And if I do not want to go, Claire's sweetness drained away. Samuel, wanting something does not always mean it is safe. You left the stove on. You wandered at the cemetery. You forgot meeting Dr. Ellison. I never met Dr. Ellison. She looked at Daniel, not me, as if I were no longer part of adult conversation. This is what I mean. Daniel folded his face into practiced pain. Dad, please. We are trying to preserve your dignity. There are insults that arrive wearing boots, and there are insults that arrive wearing white gloves. That one wore white gloves. Preston opened his portfolio. The living arrangement is only one piece of the transition. Daniel and Claire have also worked hard to reduce the burdens connected to this property. Burdens. He turned a sale agreement toward me. Residential structure and adjacent acreage. Buyer Vale Ridge Medical Development, LLC. Purchase price $1,850,000. I stared at the number, not because it was large, because it was insulting. The kitchen window alone was worth more to me. The porch railings, the fireplace stones, the pantry doorframe with Daniel's childhood height marks. Margaret's rose garden, the bedroom where she had taken her last breath. You sold the house, I said. Daniel swallowed. We accepted a preliminary offer. It is not final, he said quickly. Not until capacity matters are resolved. Preston tapped the signature page. There is already an electronic authorization on file. Tonight we simply clean up a few inconsistencies. Clean up? That was what men like him called fraud when fraud needed a bath. I pulled the page closer. There it was. My name, Samuel Robert Whitaker, written in a careful imitation of my hand. Whoever forged it had studied the shape of my S, the long tail on my R, the way I crossed the T in Whitaker. But since my heart surgery, the final letters in my signature always dipped downward. This signature stood straight as a fence post. Too perfect, too young, too false. When did I sign this? I asked. Claire answered before Daniel could. Wednesday afternoon, at our house. You were having one of your clearer windows. I was at the cemetery Wednesday afternoon. Daniel's face tightened. Dad, you are mixing up days again. I saw sweat forming at his temple. Small, bright, honest. The first honest thing in the room. Preston slid another document forward. This ratification statement confirms that you understand and approve the sale. Sign here and Daniel can take you to Maple Grove Monday, without the court needing to get involved in anything unpleasant. Claire placed a pen beside my hand, a cheap black ballpoint stamped with Preston's company slogan, Building Tomorrow Together. Daniel leaned close. Dad, this is the kindest way. Please do not make us prove in court that you cannot care for yourself. There it was, the threat beneath the prayer. I let my shoulders collapse. I let my eyes water. I let my bottom lip tremble just enough that Claire's gaze sharpened with victory. Maybe I am getting worse, I whispered. Daniel's grip softened. Oh, Dad, I do not want a judge involved, I murmured. Claire sat forward. Then we do not need one. Preston pushed the document closer. All we need is your signature. My hand moved toward the pen. Daniel stopped breathing. Claire's eyes locked on my fingers. Preston's smile widened by the smallest possible amount. I touched the pen. Then I looked toward the hallway. Before I signed, I said weakly, I need to see your mother's room one more time. Daniel went pale. Claire blinked. Preston's smile vanished. It was the first request they had not prepared for. Dad, Daniel said carefully, that is not a good idea tonight. Why? He looked at Claire. Claire looked at Preston. In that tiny triangle of panic, I saw the next locked door. What did you do? I asked. Nobody answered. I pushed myself up and walked toward the stairs. Daniel reached for my arm, but I pulled away just enough to make him look guilty for trying to stop me. At the top, Margaret's bedroom door was open. Her room had always smelled faintly of lavender soap and cedar. I kept it clean after she died. Not frozen. Not worshipped. Just respected. Her quilt at the foot of the bed. Her Bible on the nightstand. Her blue cardigan on the chair by the window. I stepped into the doorway. The room was empty. The quilt was gone. The cardigan was gone. The nightstand was bare. The honeymoon photograph had been removed from the wall, leaving a pale rectangle where sunlight had not touched the paint in decades. Cardboard boxes lined the floor. Black trash bags sagged near the closet. A roll of packing tape sat on the mattress like a weapon. For a moment I forgot to act. The pain hit too cleanly. Daniel spoke behind me. Dad, we were going to explain. I opened one box. Inside were Margaret's dresses folded without care. Her church shoes, her recipe cards. A small tin full of buttons, her handwriting on labels. Her life reduced to inventory. Claire said we had to start preparing the house for staging. Staging. They had staged my grief for resale. I lifted Margaret's blue cardigan from the box. It still carried the faintest trace of lavender soap. My hands shook. This time I did not have to pretend. I turned to Daniel with tears in my eyes and made my voice break exactly where it needed to. You are right, I whispered. I cannot do this anymore. Relief moved through all three of them like wind through dry grass. He believed he had broken me. I will sign, I said. Daniel closed his eyes. Thank you, Dad. But not tonight. His eyes opened. I want one night in this house. One last night with your mother's things. Tomorrow morning I will come with you to Maple Grove. I will sign whatever you need there. Claire hesitated. Preston hated it. Men like Preston hated delays because delays gave truth time to breathe. But Daniel had seen the tears. He needed to believe his father had finally chosen him over memory. One night, Daniel said. Preston's jaw tightened. Daniel, one night my son repeated. He deserves that. For the first time all evening, Claire looked irritated with her husband. Good. Divide the hungry and they start biting each other. They left a little after 9. Daniel hugged me at the door. I let him. His arms felt stiff, like he was embracing a problem that had finally agreed to disappear. Claire said she would drive over in the morning. Preston said nothing. He only looked at the house. When their taillights vanished, I locked the door, walked to Margaret's stripped bedroom, and opened the smallest black trash bag. Inside, beneath tissue paper and old scarves, I found Margaret's missing Bible. Tucked inside the front cover was a folded note I had never seen before. It was not addressed to me. It was addressed to Daniel. And the first line said, "If you are reading this because you tried to sell my house, then you have become the man I prayed you would never be." I stood in Margaret's empty bedroom holding the letter she had written to our son. For a long time I did not read past the first line. The hallway light spilled across the floor, catching dust in the air where her dresser used to stand. The room felt violated. Not robbed exactly. Robbery is simple. Robbery takes things and leaves a wound. This was worse. They had tried to make it look practical. Boxes, tape, trash bags, labels written in Claire's tight, impatient handwriting. Donate, discard, storage. As if Margaret's life could be divided into 3 clean piles. I sat on the edge of the bare mattress and unfolded the letter. Daniel ***. If you are reading this because you tried to sell my house, then you have become the man I prayed you would never be. I know your wife thinks sentiment is weakness. I know her father looks at land and sees only numbers. But this house was not built by numbers. Your father built it with winter hands, summer sweat, and a kind of love most people never receive in a lifetime. If you need money, ask honestly. If you are ashamed of us, say so honestly. But if you ever use my death to push your father out of the home he built for me, then you are not protecting him. You are erasing him. I pressed the paper against my knee. Margaret had not written with anger. That was what hurt most. Every sentence carried the steady sorrow of a mother who could see the storm coming but could not stop her child from walking into it. The last paragraph was shorter, sharper. Do not trust Preston Vale. He has asked too many questions about the access road, the back acreage, and your father's health. A man who asks about inheritance before grief has finished its work is not family. He is a buyer looking for a discount. I read that line 3 times. Then I turned the page over. There was one more sentence written on the back. Sam. If Daniel ignores this letter, stop seeing him as the boy we raised, and start seeing the men standing behind him. The men standing behind him. That was Margaret's final instruction to me. Not revenge. Clarity. I folded the letter and placed it inside my shirt pocket directly over my heart. Then I walked downstairs, unlocked the pantry floorboard, and pulled out the forged documents again. I laid everything across the kitchen table. The false doctor's statement, the notarized authorization, the preliminary sale notice, Maple Grove's assisted placement packet, Preston Vale's purchase agreement. At first they looked like separate papers. Then I began seeing the pattern. The same mailing address appeared on 2 forms. Suite 410 Vale Tower, downtown Atlanta. Dr. Howard Ellison's capacity statement had been faxed from that building. The notary stamp belonged to Marissa Cole Legal Services, also located in Vale Tower. Maple Grove's placement packet listed Vale Family Holdings as a preferred billing guarantor. Even the buyer, Vale Ridge Medical Development, shared officers with Preston's main company. I sat back in my chair. Daniel had betrayed me. Claire had sharpened the knife, but Preston Vale had designed the handle. The next morning I was dressed before sunrise. Not in the clothes I wanted to wear. I chose the costume they expected. Soft gray cardigan, loose khaki pants, old shoes with one lace slightly untied. I left my razor untouched, letting the white stubble show on my jaw. In the mirror, I looked tired, fragile, and harmless. Perfect. At 8:30, Daniel's car pulled into the driveway. Claire stepped out first, carrying coffee I had not asked for. Daniel followed with a duffel bag. My duffel bag, packed from my bedroom. That small detail nearly cracked the mask. He had gone through my drawers while I slept or while I was supposed to be too broken to notice. He had chosen my shirts, my socks, my pills. He had packed my life like a child leaving for summer camp. "Morning, Dad," Daniel said. "Ready." I looked at the duffel. "You packed for me." Claire smiled. "We knew it would be emotionally difficult. You took Margaret's things out of her room, too." Her smile thinned. We started organizing. Daniel opened the passenger door. "Let's not do this in the driveway." I looked back at the house. The porch railings glowed pale in the morning sun. Margaret's kitchen window reflected the trees. For a moment I let myself look like a man saying goodbye, because Daniel needed to see that, and because part of me truly was. Not goodbye to the house, goodbye to the son who had once chased fireflies across that yard, with grass stains on his knees. I climbed into the car. Claire sat in the back seat and talked the entire drive. She spoke of comfort, safety, community meals, staff activities. She used cheerful words the way a mortician uses flowers. Daniel kept both hands on the wheel, nodding whenever she paused. He looked exhausted. Not guilty. Exhausted. There is a difference. Guilt carries weight. Exhaustion only resents the burden. Maple Grove sat 20 minutes outside town behind iron gates and polished stone columns. It looked less like a nursing home than a luxury hotel, designed by someone afraid of death. White brick, trimmed hedges. A fountain in the circular drive. Bronze letters mounted beside the entrance. Maple Grove Memory and Wellness Residence. Memory came first. Wellness came second. That told me everything. Inside, the air smelled of lemon polish, warm carpet, and something chemical underneath. A receptionist looked up and immediately recognized Daniel. "Mr. Whitaker," she said brightly. "We have been expecting you." "Not how may I help you?" "Expecting you." Daniel placed a hand on my back. "This is my father, Samuel." The receptionist's eyes softened in that professional way people use when they have been told a story before meeting the person. "Of course," she said. "Welcome, Mr. Whitaker. We are going to take very good care of you." I gave her a confused smile. Claire squeezed my arm. "See, everyone is so kind here." A woman in a cream suit appeared from a side hallway. Silver hair, pearl earrings, clipboard held against her chest like a shield. "Samuel," she said warmly, "I am Patricia Lang, residence director." She did not ask permission to use my first name. That irritated me more than it should have. Preston Vale came out of her office 5 seconds later. That did not irritate me. That confirmed everything. He wore a navy suit and carried a paper cup of coffee. Not visitor coffee from the lobby. Office coffee. Comfortable coffee. The kind of coffee a man drinks when he has been there long enough to know where the machine is. "Samuel," he said, spreading his arms. "Big day." Daniel flinched slightly. He had not told me Preston would be there. Claire shot her husband a warning look. Patricia Lang pretended not to notice. I made my face go soft and uncertain. "Are we signing something?" Daniel relaxed at once. "Just intake forms, Dad." "Medical safety forms," Claire added. Preston smiled. "And a few housekeeping items to keep the property transition from becoming messy." There it was. The truth stepping out from behind the curtain. Not my health. Not my safety. The property transition. Patricia led us into a private conference room. On the table were folders, pens, a pitcher of water, and a small digital recorder already blinking red. I noticed it immediately. So did Preston. He reached over and casually turned it off. "Family conversation," he said to Patricia with a charming smile. No need to make Samuel nervous. Patricia hesitated, then nodded. That was when I understood she was not merely helpful. She was owned. Daniel sat beside me. Claire sat on my other side. Preston stood near the window with his hands in his pockets, watching all of us reflected in the glass. Patricia placed a form in front of me. Voluntary residential admission. Below it, cognitive support authorization. Below that, personal communication management consent. I read the third title twice. Communication management. A pretty phrase for isolation. If I sign this, I asked slowly, who controls my phone calls? Patricia's smile did not move. Only during the initial stabilization period. How long is that? Claire answered. As long as medically appropriate. And who decides what is medically appropriate? The room became still. Preston walked to the table and placed both hands on the back of an empty chair. Samuel, he said softly. This suspicious questioning is exactly why we are here. I looked at my son. Daniel stared at the documents. Not at me, at the documents. Because somewhere along the way his father had stopped being a person and become an obstacle with a signature. Preston leaned closer. Let me be plain. You can cooperate today and keep this dignified. Or Monday morning the emergency petition goes before Judge Harlan. At that point, Daniel will be appointed temporary guardian. Maple Grove will receive you under secured care, and the sale complications will be resolved without your disruptive participation. My heartbeat slowed. There was the machine Margaret had warned me about. Preston, the developer. Claire, the daughter. Daniel, the blood relation. Patricia, the facility director. Dr. Ellison, the false medical witness. Marissa Cole, the friendly notary. Judge Harlan, the private door waiting Monday morning. A whole circle of respectable people standing around one old man calling theft protection. I let my mouth tremble. I do not want trouble, I whispered. Daniel finally looked at me. His eyes were wet. For one dangerous second, I wondered if some part of him was still alive under all that greed. Then he slid the pen toward my hand. Then signed Dad. I picked it up. Claire leaned forward. Patricia held her breath. Preston watched my fingers. I placed the pen against the paper and made one slow, shaky mark. Not my signature, just a line, a broken line. Then I dropped the pen and pressed my hand to my chest. I feel dizzy, I whispered. Daniel stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. Patricia rushed to the door and called for a nurse. Claire grabbed the documents before they could slide away. Preston's face tightened with rage so quickly that only I saw it. Good. Angry men become careless. A nurse brought water. Daniel hovered over me, frightened now, not for my health, but for his schedule. Claire kept whispering, maybe we should continue. He can still sign if he calms down. But Patricia, worried about liability, refused. We paused, she said firmly. No signatures during a possible medical episode. Preston's jaw flexed. I lowered my eyes to hide the first honest smile I had felt all morning. They wheeled me into a private assessment room and left me alone for 12 minutes. 12 minutes was enough, because under my cardigan clipped to the inside seam, Elaine Mercer had placed a tiny recording device the night before, and Preston Vale had just threatened me on tape. When Daniel finally returned, his face pale with frustration, he crouched beside the chair and took my hand. Dad, he whispered, why are you making this so hard? I looked at my son's tired, desperate face and almost answered him as a father. Almost. Then I remembered Margaret's empty bedroom. I remembered the forged signature. I remembered the room they had already prepared to swallow me. So I gave him what he needed most. A broken old man. I am sorry, Danny, I whispered, using his childhood name. I will do better tomorrow. His face softened with relief. He thought tomorrow belonged to him. But as he drove me back to Margaret's house that afternoon, with Claire silently texting in the back seat and Preston following behind us in his black SUV, I knew the truth. Tomorrow would be the day I let them win. And after that, they would never see me coming. Saturday morning came bright and cruel. Sunlight poured through Margaret's kitchen window, turning the dust in the air gold. For a moment, standing there in that warm square of light, I could almost pretend the house was still ours in the old way. Coffee percolating, bacon snapping in the pan, Margaret singing off-key while Daniel, 7 years old and barefoot, begged for pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse. Then a car door slammed outside. Memory vanished. War returned. Daniel arrived first, alone this time. He stepped onto the porch with red eyes and a folder tucked beneath his arm. He looked like a man who had not slept, which pleased me. Sleep is a privilege for the innocent. Dad, he said softly when I opened the door. Can we talk before Claire gets here? I let my hand tremble on the doorknob. Of course, Danny. That childhood name still affected him. I saw it pass across his face like a shadow. For 1 second he was not Preston Vale's puppet or Claire's desperate husband. He was the boy who used to crawl into our bed during thunderstorms. Then he looked past me at the house, and the boy disappeared. We sat at the kitchen table. Margaret's chair remained empty. I had moved Claire's coffee cup from the night before and placed Margaret's Bible there instead. Daniel noticed but said nothing. I know yesterday was hard, he began. Maple Grove was overwhelming. It seemed nice. Relief softened his mouth. It is nice, and it can still be easy. We do not need court. We do not need arguments. We just need to handle this today. What happens today? He opened the folder. Inside was a revised document, not Maple Grove admission forms, not a sale ratification. This one was worse. Voluntary trustee resignation and appointment of successor trustee. My fingers went cold. Daniel had finally found the real door. He did not understand the lock, but he had found the door. If you sign this, he said carefully, I can manage the trust for you. Not sell anything behind your back. Not force anything. Just manage it. I can protect you from mistakes. I looked at the paper. Elaine had warned me they might try this once the sale notice failed. Preston would need valid trust authority. Without it, his medical development deal was nothing but a hungry man, staring through a restaurant window. You want to be trustee? Daniel reached across the table and took my hand. I want to be your son. The lie hurt because of how badly I wanted it to be true. I looked down at his hand. There was a faint scar across his knuckle from when he was 12, and broke Margaret's favorite vase throwing a baseball in the hallway. He had cried harder over disappointing her than over the cut itself. That boy had existed. I had not invented him, but the man sitting in front of me had packed his mother's dresses into trash bags. I am scared, I whispered. Daniel squeezed my hand. I know. I do not want strangers deciding my life. Then let me help you. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I nodded. His eyes brightened. But I want to do it properly, I said. No rush signatures. No Maple Grove conference room. No Preston hovering. If I am giving you authority, I want Elaine Mercer present. She wrote the trust. His hand stiffened. Elaine is old-fashioned, he said. She will complicate everything. Then I will not sign. The softness left his face so quickly, it was almost beautiful. There he was. Not the son. The appetite. He pulled his hand away. Dad, you cannot keep using that house as a shrine. I kept my eyes low, I know. You cannot keep punishing me because Mom died. I know. He leaned back, breathing hard through his nose. Claire was right. Every time I tried to make a responsible decision, you dragged Mom's ghost into the room. I let that sentence sit between us. I let it cut me. I let him think it weakened me. Then I whispered, maybe I need to apologize to Claire too. Daniel blinked. You would do that. For peace, I said. Invite her tonight. Preston too. We can sit down with Elaine on video call. If everything is explained calmly, maybe I will feel better. Daniel studied me. He wanted to trust the surrender. He was desperate for it. Greed makes smart people impatient, and impatience makes them stupid. I will call Claire, he said. After he left, I locked the door and walked straight to the den. Elaine answered on the first ring. He brought the trustee resignation, I said. I expected that. I told him I might sign tonight if you attended by video. You are not signing anything. No, I said. But he needs to believe I am. Elaine was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Sam, once we do this, there is no going halfway. If they incriminate themselves clearly, I notify the court, the county fraud unit, and the state elder abuse division. Good. And if Daniel goes down with them? I looked toward the pantry door frame where his childhood height marks still climbed the painted wood like little prayers. My throat tightened. He already went down, I said. Tonight just shows him the bottom. We prepared all afternoon. Elaine arranged a recorded video conference, legally disclosed. Through a line in the consent form they would be too eager to read carefully. A deputy from the county fraud unit waited off screen in her office. Patricia Lang's threat recording had already been transcribed. Dr. Ellison's office had provided written confirmation that I had never been examined. Marissa Cole's notary license had been flagged for review, but the real bait was on my kitchen table. A new document drafted by Elaine. It looked like exactly what Daniel wanted, a trustee resignation package, naming him successor trustee over the Maple Ridge Family Land Trust. But buried in the third page in plain legal language was a declaration that the signer had direct personal knowledge of all prior forged documents, sale notices, capacity claims, and outside inducements connected to the property. In simpler words, if Daniel signed as accepting trustee, he would also certify that no fraud had occurred. And if he admitted fraud while trying to force me, the trap would close. At 6:52 p.m., 3 cars pulled into my driveway. Daniel, Claire, Preston, and behind them, to my surprise, Patricia Lang from Maple Grove stepped out carrying a slim leather folder. They brought the cage to my house. Good. I opened the door wearing my gray cardigan and my tired old man face. Claire kissed my cheek as if she had not tried to bury me alive. Preston walked in without removing his coat. Patricia smiled with professional pity. Daniel placed his hand on my shoulder. You are doing the right thing, Dad. I looked at all of them standing beneath the roof I built for Margaret. Yes, I said softly. I think I finally am. We gathered around the kitchen table. Elaine appeared on my laptop screen, calm and silver-haired, with her reading glasses low on her nose. Before Mr. Whitaker signs anything, Elaine said, I need everyone present to confirm their role in this transition. Preston smiled. Of course. Claire folded her hands. We only want what is best for Samuel. Patricia nodded. Maple Grove is prepared to support a safe placement. Daniel looked at me with shining relief, and I looked down at the blank signature line, the same way I would look at it 2 nights later in that Maple Grove conference room. Only this time the house was listening. Margaret's Bible sat beside my hand. Elaine leaned closer to the screen. Daniel, she said, why don't you begin by explaining why your father needs to resign as trustee tonight? My son took a breath. Then he began telling the lie that would destroy him. Daniel began carefully. That was how I knew he was lying. Truth has weight, but it does not need choreography. My son folded his hands on Margaret's kitchen table, glanced once at Claire, once at Preston, and then looked into Elaine Mercer's face on the laptop screen with the solemn expression of a man testifying at a funeral. My father has been declining for months, he said. He forgets conversations. He becomes suspicious. He fixates on my mother's death and the house in ways that are no longer healthy. Elaine did not blink. Specific examples. Daniel swallowed. He accused us of trying to steal from him. Were you? Claire's head snapped up. Excuse me. Elaine's voice remained calm. It is a relevant question. Preston stepped forward. Mrs. Mercer, we are here to facilitate a voluntary family transition, not endure hostile accusations. Then answer calmly, Elaine said. Preston smiled, but the smile had teeth now. Vale Ridge made a fair preliminary offer on an obsolete residential structure sitting in the middle of an urgent medical development corridor. Daniel acted responsibly by exploring that offer before Samuel's condition deteriorated further. My condition, I murmured. Daniel reached for my arm. Dad, please. Elaine turned her attention to Claire. Mrs. Whitaker, who arranged the mobile notary. Claire hesitated. Daniel did, she said. Daniel looked at her sharply. Elaine asked Daniel. He recovered. Claire helped with scheduling. I handled the family side. And Dr. Ellison. Patricia Lang finally spoke. Maple Grove received the statement through Mr. Vale's office. The room froze. Preston's face hardened. There it was. One thread pulled loose. Elaine leaned closer to the screen. Through Mr. Vale's office. Patricia realized too late that she had stepped into a hole. For administrative convenience, Preston cut in. This is getting absurd. No, I said softly. Everyone looked at me. I had barely spoken all evening. My silence had made them comfortable. My weakness had made them careless. This is finally getting honest. Daniel's hand tightened around the edge of the table. I reached into my cardigan pocket and pulled out Margaret's letter. Claire's eyes narrowed. What is that? Your mother's last warning, I said to Daniel. His face drained of color. I unfolded the page with slow, careful hands and read the first line aloud. If you are reading this because you tried to sell my house, then you have become the man I prayed you would never be. Daniel flinched like I had struck him. Claire whispered, That is manipulative. No, I said. That is a mother knowing her son. Preston slapped his palm on the table. Enough. Samuel, you will sign the resignation tonight or Monday. We proceed with the emergency petition. Once Judge Harlan hears the medical statement, your theatrical resistance ends. Elaine's voice sharpened. Thank you, Mr. Vale. For what? For confirming coercion. Preston looked at the laptop. For the first time, he noticed the small red recording icon glowing in the corner of the screen. His expression changed. Not fear yet. Calculation. We are leaving, he said. But Claire was already unraveling. No. We cannot leave. The hospital board deadline is Tuesday. If this old man ruins the access agreement, my father loses the whole eastern parcel. Daniel stood. Claire, stop. She turned on him. No, you stop. You promised this would be done before Monday. You said he was weak enough. You said all we needed was one clean signature. The room went silent. I looked at my son. Daniel looked at the floor. And in that silence, I finally heard the last sound a father ever wants to hear. The sound of hope dying cleanly. Preston grabbed Claire's arm. Outside, now. They left in a storm of perfume, leather shoes, and panic. Daniel lingered near the doorway, eyes wet, mouth trembling like a boy caught stealing from a church collection plate. Dad, he whispered. I never meant for it to go this far. I looked at him for a long time. Yes, I said. You did. He left without another word. Monday morning they tried anyway. That is the thing about desperate people. Evidence does not stop them at first. It only makes them run faster toward the cliff. The emergency hearing was moved to Maple Grove's private conference suite under the excuse of protecting my fragile condition. Judge Harlan appeared by video. Patricia Lang stood near the wall. Preston sat with his attorney. Claire sat rigid beside Daniel, her face pale beneath too much makeup. They had expected me to arrive confused. I arrived with Elaine Mercer. Behind her were two county investigators, a state elder abuse officer, and a deputy sheriff who had removed his hat out of respect, but kept his eyes on Preston. Daniel stood when I entered. Dad. I did not answer. I sat at the table where the trustee resignation waited. The same kind of blank signature line from the night in my opening memory. The same old trap. The same arrogant hope in my son's eyes. Only now the room was full of witnesses. Judge Harlan cleared his throat from the screen. Mr. Whitaker, do you understand why you are here? Yes, Your Honor, I said clearly. My son, my daughter-in-law, and her father are attempting to have me declared incompetent so they can complete a fraudulent sale of my late wife's home and seize control of trust land worth over $40 million. The room erupted. Claire gasped. Preston's attorney stood halfway. Patricia turned gray. Daniel gripped the back of his chair. Judge Harlan's eyes sharpened. Mrs. Mercer. Elaine placed a thick binder on the table. We have recordings, forged documents, confirmation from Dr. Ellison's office that Mr. Whitaker was never examined, evidence of a compromised notary, and a recorded threat made by Mr. Vale regarding this very petition. Preston said, this is outrageous. The deputy sheriff stepped closer. Elaine clicked a remote. Daniel's voice filled the room from Saturday night. Asterisk. You said he was weak enough. You said all we needed was one clean signature. Claire's voice followed, shrill and unmistakable. Asterisk. If this old man ruins the access agreement, my father loses the whole eastern parcel. No one moved. I looked at Daniel. Before I sign anything, I said, my voice steady, tell them what you did to your mother's house. His lips parted. Nothing came out. So I answered for him. He packed her clothes into trash bags. He removed her photographs. He let strangers measure the porch I built for her. Then he forged my name to sell what she died protecting. Daniel began to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just the small broken tears of a man realizing the performance was over, and the audience had finally seen his face. Judge Harlan terminated the emergency petition on the spot and referred the matter for criminal review. Patricia Lang was escorted out for questioning. Preston Vale's attorney stopped speaking entirely. Claire tried to blame Daniel. Daniel tried to blame Preston. Preston blamed everyone except himself. That is how thieves behave when the lights come on. They do not apologize. They look for a darker room. As the deputy read Preston his rights in the hallway, I stood slowly and picked up Margaret's letter from the table. Daniel reached for me. "Dad, please." I looked down at his hand. Once I would have given anything to hold it. That morning I simply stepped away. The first thing I did after leaving Maple Grove was not call a reporter. I did not celebrate. I did not drive to the county jail to watch Preston Vale lose his polished smile behind glass. I did not ask Elaine how many years Daniel might face, or whether Claire would finally remove Margaret's pearls now that the performance was over. I went home. The house stood exactly where I had left it, quiet beneath the Georgia sun, with Margaret's porch railings casting long shadows across the steps. For the first time in days, no black SUVs waited in the driveway. No strangers measured the fence line. No one stood on my porch pretending theft was concerned. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of dust, cardboard, and lavender. Margaret's room was still half empty. The boxes were still there. The trash bags still sagged near the closet. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, then bent down and opened the first box. One dress at a time, I put my wife's life back where it belonged. Her blue cardigan returned to the chair by the window. Her Bible returned to the nightstand. The honeymoon photograph went back on the wall, covering the pale rectangle that had looked too much like a wound. I unfolded the quilt and spread it across the foot of the bed, smoothing the fabric with both hands until the wrinkles disappeared. That was when I finally cried. Not loud. Not the kind of crying people notice. Just an old man sitting beside the bed where his wife had died, letting grief and relief pass through him like weather. 3 weeks later, the truth became official. Preston Vale's development company collapsed under fraud investigations. His hospital corridor deal dissolved before the first shovel touched dirt. Maple Grove suspended Patricia Lang. Dr. Ellison's forged statement triggered a licensing inquiry, even though his office had denied involvement. Marissa Cole lost her notary commission and gained a criminal attorney. Claire filed for separation before Daniel's first indictment hearing. That did not surprise me. Some people marry ambition, not a person. When ambition starts bleeding, they leave before it stains their shoes. Daniel was charged with forgery, elder exploitation conspiracy, and attempted fraud against a protected trust. The prosecutor offered words like accountability and restitution. Elaine offered words like injunction and permanent removal. I listened to all of them quietly. Then one afternoon, a letter came from Daniel. It was handwritten. For a while I just stared at the envelope. His handwriting still looked like the boy who used to write Christmas lists in crayon. But the return address was from the county detention center, and childhood cannot fit inside a jail cell. I opened it on the porch. "Dad, I know I do not deserve forgiveness. I keep telling myself Claire and Preston pushed me, but that is only part of the truth. I let them. I wanted the money. I wanted the life. I wanted to be seen as successful without earning it the way you did. I thought Mom's house was trapping you in grief. Now I understand I was the one trapped by greed. I am sorry I packed her things. I am sorry I used your age against you. I am sorry I made you afraid of your own son. I do not expect you to visit. I just wanted to say I remember the pantry door frame. I remember you lifting me up so Mom could mark my height. I remember being loved." I folded the letter slowly. For the first time, I did not know whether the pain in my chest was anger or mercy. Maybe it was both. I did not visit him that week, or the next. Forgiveness is not a door other people get to kick open because guilt finally taught them how to knock. It is a road. Some people walk it. Some people never find the first step. But I did not throw the letter away. I placed it inside Margaret's Bible. A year later, the Maple Ridge land was placed into a permanent community trust. Not for developers, not for luxury condos, not for men like Preston Vale. Part of it became a public garden named after Margaret Ann Whitaker, with roses along the fence and benches facing east. Part of it became a trade scholarship fund for young men and women who wanted to learn carpentry, electrical work, plumbing, masonry, and all the honest skills that built this country long before glass towers tried to buy its soul. The old house stayed mine, not because I needed 12 rooms, not because I wanted to win, because some promises are not finished just because one person dies. On the first spring morning after the garden opened, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and watched children run between the rose beds. Their laughter moved through the yard where Daniel once chased fireflies. For a moment, the memory hurt less, not because the betrayal had vanished, but because something living had grown around it. Elaine came by with fresh legal papers and a store-bought pie she pretended was homemade. "You did good, Sam," she said, sitting beside me. I looked at Margaret's kitchen window glowing in the morning sun. "No," I said softly, "she did." I just finally listened. That is the thing about love. Real love does not always save people from becoming cruel. It does not guarantee loyalty. It does not stop greed from entering through a family door wearing a familiar face. But real love leaves instructions. In letters. In houses. In promises. In the quiet strength to stand up when everyone else has mistaken your silence for surrender. So if this story made you think of someone who built their whole life for family and was repaid with betrayal, remember this: kindness is not weakness, age is not uselessness, and a loving heart does not mean a foolish one. And if you still have someone in your life who protected you, raised you, sacrificed for you, or gave you a home when they had very little themselves, do not wait until their chair is empty to understand what they gave. Honor them while they can still hear you. Share this story with someone who needs that reminder. And if you believe stories like this still matter, stay with us for the next one. The end.